Chocolate and its sad history. The snap of a dark chocolate bar and its velvety melt on the tongue are synonymous with comfort. Chocolate is associated with celebration, love, and small moments of happiness. Yet the sweetness we enjoy today is a relatively modern invention, and it was bought at a staggering human cost. Beneath chocolate's smooth surface lies a long history of suffering, exploitation, and inequality that stretches across centuries and continents. Sacred origins in the ancient Americas. Chocolate's story began thousands of years ago in Mesoamerica, where the Olmec, Maya, and Aztec civilizations first cultivated cacao. Unlike modern chocolate, cacao was consumed as a bitter drink mixed with chili, spices, or honey. It was not a casual snack, but a sacred substance, deeply woven into religion, politics, and daily life. For the Maya, cacao symbolized life and fertility. It was used in ceremonies, weddings, and funerals. And cacao beans were so valuable that they served as currency. The Aztecs believed cacao was a divine gift, associated with the god Quetzalcoatl. According to historical accounts recorded by Spanish chroniclers, emperors such as Moctezuma II were said to drink large quantities of chocolate for strength and vitality. A detail many historians now view as an exaggeration meant to emphasize imperial wealth. Yet even at this early stage, cacao was linked to suffering. In some rituals, human sacrifice accompanied ceremonies meant to ensure a good harvest. Chocolate was sacred, but it was never innocent. The bitterness of empire. When Spanish explorers arrived in the Americas in the 16th century, they encountered cacao for the first time. At first, Europeans found the drink unpleasantly bitter. That changed once sugar, vanilla, and milk were added. Chocolate was transformed from a ritual drink into a fashionable luxury. European royalty embraced chocolate enthusiastically. It was believed to be medicinal, energizing, and even an aphrodisiac. Demand soared among royal courts and wealthy households, and chocolate became a symbol of status and power. But Europe's growing appetite for chocolate had consequences. Indigenous populations were devastated by diseases brought by colonizers, and surviving communities were forced into brutal labor systems to meet European demand. What Europeans enjoyed as comfort came at the cost of indigenous lives and cultures. Slavery and the global cacao empire. As cacao production expanded, European powers established plantations across the Caribbean, South America, and later Africa. These plantations depended heavily on enslaved Africans. The cacao trade fueled the machinery of the transatlantic slave trade, chaining the production of luxury to the literal chains of human beings. Enslaved workers endured exhausting labor, violence, and dehumanization, so that chocolate could be consumed cheaply and abundantly in Europe. By the 18th and 19th centuries, cacao had become a global commodity built on forced labor. One of the most horrifying examples of colonial exploitation occurred in Central Africa, under King Leopold II of Belgium. While Leopold did not invent forced labor, his infamous red rubber regime systematized terror on such a scale that it sparked one of the first modern international human rights movements. While Leopold's primary focus was rubber and ivory, the methods of terror he used, forced labor, brutal punishment, and mass death, became a blueprint for colonial extraction systems elsewhere. The exposure of these abuses later pressured reformers, journalists, and even companies such as Cadbury to scrutinize labor practices in other colonies, including cacao plantations in São Tomé and Príncipe. The methods themselves, coercion, quotas, and violence, reshaped extraction systems across colonial economies, and persisted long after slavery was officially abolished. The Industrial Revolution, chocolate for everyone. The Industrial Revolution changed chocolate forever. New technologies, such as the cocoa press, allowed chocolate to be produced cheaply and in solid form. Chocolate bars became affordable, transforming chocolate from an elite luxury into a mass-market product. This shift seemed like progress, but it came with hidden costs. To keep prices low, companies prioritized quantity over quality and pushed production to regions where labor was cheapest and least protected. A key moment in this history was the Cadbury scandal of the early 1900s. William Cadbury discovered that cacao used by British chocolate companies came from plantations on the islands of São Tomé and Príncipe, where forced labor and conditions resembling slavery were widespread. Public outrage followed, and boycotts were organized. However, rather than ending exploitation, production simply moved again, this time largely to West Africa. A legacy in the soil. Today, more than 70% of the world's cacao comes from West Africa, particularly Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. Yet the global price of cocoa is largely set on distant commodity exchanges in cities like London and New York, far removed from the farmers themselves, who have little power to influence the price they're paid. Millions of small farmers live in extreme poverty, earning too little to support their families. As a result, child labor remains widespread. Many children work long hours in dangerous conditions, instead of attending school. Environmental damage is another major consequence of this system. Rainforests are cleared to make room for cacao farms, destroying ecosystems and contributing to climate change. Chocolate, once sacred to nature-based cultures, is now linked to deforestation and environmental loss. These problems are not accidents. They are the direct result of centuries of treating chocolate as a cheap commodity, rather than a product made by real people with real lives. A hopeful path forward. Despite this dark history, change is possible, and it is already underway. In recent years, movements such as Fair Trade International, Rainforest Alliance certification, and the Bean to Bar chocolate movement have challenged the traditional chocolate industry. These approaches emphasize transparency, fair wages, environmental protection, and direct relationships between farmers and chocolate makers. Consumers can also play a role in shaping this future. Looking for labels that guarantee fair pay, choosing craft or ethically sourced chocolate, and learning where cacao comes from are small but meaningful steps. Paying a little more for chocolate can help ensure that farmers are treated with dignity, and that children are not forced into labor. Remembering the true cost of sweetness. Chocolate's journey, from sacred ritual drink to global snack, reveals how pleasure and pain are often deeply connected. Every chocolate bar carries a story shaped by history, power, and human choices. Understanding chocolate's sad history does not mean we must give it up. Instead, it asks us to consume with awareness and responsibility. Recent efforts such as the Living Income Differential, LID, introduced by Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire to demand higher prices for cocoa farmers, show that this history is still being written. Only by acknowledging the suffering behind the sweetness can chocolate's future become as just as it is delicious.
It's time to study new words in context. 1. Velvety. Definition. Describes a texture or feeling that is very smooth, soft, and rich, similar to velvet. Example: the velvety texture of melted chocolate makes it feel luxurious and comforting. 2. Staggering. Definition. So surprising, large, or shocking that it is difficult to fully understand or believe. Example: the staggering number of people affected by colonial exploitation is hard to comprehend. 3. Exploitation. Definition. The unfair use of people or resources for profit or benefit, often by those in power. Example: the chocolate industry's history includes the exploitation of enslaved and impoverished workers. 4. Substance. Definition. A material or physical matter, especially one that can be touched, consumed, or used. Example: cacao was considered a sacred substance in many ancient Mesoamerican cultures. 5. Fertility. Definition. The ability to produce life, growth, or abundance, often linked to agriculture or reproduction. Example: ancient societies associated cacao with fertility and the continuation of life. 6. Chronicler. Definition. A person who records historical events in writing, often as they happen or shortly afterward. Example: Spanish chroniclers documented the wealth and customs of the Aztec Empire. 7. Medicinal. Definition. Related to medicine or believed to have healing or health-giving properties. Example: in Europe, chocolate was once considered medicinal and prescribed to restore energy. 8. Aphrodisiac. Definition. Something believed to increase desire or pleasure, especially of a romantic or sexual kind. Example: Chocolate was long thought to be an aphrodisiac that stimulated passion. 9. Red rubber regime. Definition: a brutal forced labor system in the Congo under King Leopold II, known for extreme violence used to meet rubber quotas. Example: the red rubber regime shocked the world with its cruelty and mass human suffering. 10. Extraction. Definition: the process of removing natural resources from the land, often for profit. Example: colonial economies were built on the extraction of resources, such as rubber, cocoa, and gold. 11. Scrutinize. Definition: to examine something very carefully and critically, in order to find faults or understand it fully. Example: journalists began to scrutinize the chocolate industry's labor practices. 12. Coercion. Definition: the use of force, threats, or pressure to make someone do something against their will. Example: coercion was commonly used to force workers to meet impossible production quotas. 13. Distant commodity exchanges. Definition: financial markets in faraway cities where goods like cocoa are bought and sold, often without involvement from the producers. Example: distant commodity exchanges. Determine cocoa prices without considering farmers' living conditions. 14. Deforestation. Definition: the large-scale cutting down of forests, usually to make room for farming or industry. Example: deforestation has increased as more land is cleared for cocoa plantations.
Comprehension questions. 1. What sensory experience does the article use to open the discussion about chocolate? Answer: the article opens by describing the snap of a dark chocolate bar and its smooth, velvety melt, which are associated with comfort and pleasure. 2. How was chocolate originally consumed by ancient Mesoamerican civilizations? Answer: chocolate was originally consumed as a bitter drink made from cacao, often mixed with chili, spices, or honey, rather than as a sweet solid food. 3. Why was cacao considered valuable in Maya and Aztec societies? Answer: cacao was considered sacred, used in religious ceremonies, and valued so highly that cacao beans were used as currency. 4. According to historical accounts, how did Moctezuma II supposedly consume chocolate, and how do historians interpret this today? Answer: Spanish chroniclers claimed Moctezuma II drank large quantities of chocolate daily, but modern historians believe this was likely exaggerated to emphasize his wealth and power. 5. What change made chocolate popular in Europe after its introduction from the Americas? Answer: Europeans added sugar, vanilla, and milk to cacao, transforming it from a bitter drink into a sweet luxury beverage. 6. How did European demand for chocolate affect indigenous populations in the Americas? Answer: indigenous populations were devastated by European diseases and forced into harsh labor systems to meet growing chocolate demand. 7. In what way did the cacao trade become connected to the transatlantic slave trade? Answer: cacao plantations relied heavily on enslaved African labor, making chocolate production directly tied to the transatlantic slave trade. 8. Why is King Leopold II mentioned in the article, even though his main focus was not cacao? Answer: Leopold II's brutal forced labor system in the Congo demonstrated extreme methods of exploitation that influenced colonial labor practices elsewhere, including cacao-producing regions. 9. What impact did Leopold II's red rubber system have on global awareness? Answer: it sparked one of the first modern international human rights movements and increased scrutiny of colonial labor systems. 10. How did the Industrial Revolution change chocolate production and consumption? Answer: new technologies allowed chocolate to be mass-produced cheaply, turning it from an elite luxury into an affordable product for the general public. 11. What was the Cadbury scandal and why was it significant? Answer: William Cadbury discovered that cacao from São Tomé and Príncipe was produced using forced labor, leading to public outrage and exposing unethical practices in the chocolate industry. 12. Why did exploitation continue even after public boycotts and scandals? Answer: instead of ending exploitation, companies moved cacao production to other regions, with cheaper labor and weaker protections. 13. Where does most of the world's cacao come from today, And what problem does this create? Answer. Over 70% of cacao comes from West Africa, where farmers face extreme poverty and child labor remains widespread. 14. How does the global cocoa pricing system contribute to farmer poverty? Answer. Cocoa prices are set on international commodity exchanges in cities like London and New York, leaving farmers with little control over what they are paid. 15. What solutions or actions does the article suggest for creating a fairer chocolate industry? Answer. The article suggests supporting fair trade and Rainforest Alliance certifications, choosing bean-to-bar chocolate, and backing initiatives like the Living Income Differential to ensure fair pay for farmers.